I stayed in the hole for 5 months.
The public defender. What is
he came? He came a few days after, and he says, Ray, I was appointed. His name was Marty Fakenbaum. He said, I was appointed by the court to come and represent you. I said, okay, sir. And we sat down, we talked like you and I speaking right now.
Right.
And he asked me, I said, first of all, why am I here? I said, these people said that I was trafficking cocaine. I said, that's a lie. I got documents in here to show you that I'm at work. I said, first of all, how could I be traveling to these various states and living 350 kilograms of cocaine? My wife worked that night at the Postal Service. I was there with my 2 daughters. I said, and furthermore, I'm at work. When they said I was traveling to all these states, I'm at work. What's amazing to me, Matt, is the fact that the Broward Sheriff Office has a fiduciary duty, internal affairs, that if a man or woman commit a crime, they have to call you down there for questioning. They have to give you a garage statement. At no time did they ever ask me, they never asked me if I was associated or affiliated with any type of wrongdoing, anything of that nature. They just showed up at my home. These are the same guys that actually went into my vehicle. My wife and I had bought a Mercedes, and my brother was washing the car. And as my brother was washing the car, the same task force, drug task force, go in the car without a search warrant, searched the car, and said, how could I afford this type of vehicle? It was a Mercedes, but the car had expensive emblems on the back of it. The car was a 1993 400 SEL, but they had V12 600 on the back of it. On the side it said V12, and on the back it said S600. So BSO, these officers that went in the car said, oh, he must have been selling drugs to own this type of automobile. Where's the camera on this car? So my brother said, man, you guys know who that is. That's my brother. He worked for the sheriff department. My identification was in the console of the car. These are the same people who showed up in my home and took me into custody, who arrested me. But they're the ones that are crooks, not me. And I told my attorney this, I said, listen, you need to do your homework, man. I said, and furthermore, I'm not going to take something that I didn't do. He says, Ray, I'm telling you, you're faced with natural life imprisonment. This is the feds. The feds got a 98.8% conviction rate. I told him, I said, God got a conviction rate of 0%, and I'm not taking anything. I wouldn't even take time served. I'm going to trial, man.
Like, I fell in love with doing fraud so much to the point I wanted to learn everything about the bank. It got so bad I would call about an account, a discrepancy with an account, and I knew more than the person on the other line. I was like, no, what you got to do is you got to transfer me, and they have to verify these transactions to lift the hold. Cause like, no, it's a hard hold. I say, no, they'll lift it. I had a block before. I know what I'm talking about. And then it'll work. I be knowing more than what they know, and they work there. I'm like, it's crazy. It got so bad. Okay, so let me tell you about this bank. It was called First Charter. This bank, and how I found out about this bank was because I ran out of checks. It came a time where like we couldn't get our hands on like the checks that we needed. It was just one of those weeks, man. And
the town was dry.
It was dry. It was dry because I had dudes that was like breaking in cars and stuff and getting checks and stuff. And then I had people sign up, but things kind of slowed down because I turned into the dude. I stopped signing people up because like most people that I had working for me on signups, they just stopped calling me and they started doing it themselves. They're like, we don't need him. Mm-hmm. So like I ended up getting aged accounts. Like I'm meeting people that's done had Wachovia for 10 years and I'm going big on big. Like I'm dropping 15,000 in your account, 20,000 in your account. Like I'm 30,000. Like I'll never forget I had this one guy, it's in my indictment. He was in NASCAR school and I took that situation and took advantage of it. So I called the girl that I had working in the bank. Remember the girl I was telling you about?
Yeah.
She worked.
How did you get to her?
Okay. So this dude that I was like, he was like my little protege back in the day. I was letting him run with me. He had a baby by her sister. So I found out my baby mama's sister didn't work at the bank. I'm like, man, plug me in, man. He like, I got you. He was like, so he ended up calling her in the car with me and he was like, look, we gonna pay you, but we gonna need some information. So she's like, okay, I'll do it. Like it's whatever. Like, they want money. Like it's cool. So we did a little test run, and this guy we had that he found, he was in NASCAR school. He was wanting to be a NASCAR driver. It was weird. But I mean, he was in school to be a NASCAR driver. So we would put tuition on the checks. And she was like, oh yeah, his limit high. He, I guess he had a joint account with his parents or something like that. So their limit was like outrageous. So like we was writing checks for like, I started off low.
And they don't really show this in the movie, is we didn't really fight about women ever, but for whatever reason he wanted to write about that. We fought about his drug addiction. And that's really where my attention was focused. Because now you have to remember I have 2 babies
Right.
that I want to keep safe. And I'm very concerned that his drug addiction is escalating.
Right.
Yeah. And so that was where a lot of our issues stemmed.
Does he ever, I mean, did he ever agree to go to like a rehab or?
Well, so what happens is, and it's, again, it's a little different in the movie, but I finally confront him because he's cooking powder in the country kitchen.
Okay.
Okay. And I have 2 babies upstairs, and I'm like, okay, this is nuts. And so I confront him and I say, you know, I'm not going to sit here and watch you kill yourself. All these people that you make money for, they don't care about you.
Right.
I actually care. And I'm not just going to sit here and watch you do this. So I said, you have to go to rehab and we have to do an intervention. You have to go. And that's when he goes crazy. Takes all my clothing and jewelry, throws them in the fireplace, lights them on fire, screams obscenities that I won't say. And so I go into my closet and I said, and I leaned against the closet and just said, God, give me the strength to do this. I don't know how on earth I'm going to be able to do this. And so I left that night and went to my mother's and gained some strength. And I was going home the next day to deal with my babies. My housekeepers were there, so I knew that they were safe. I didn't leave them, my children, with him, of course. Right. And my mother said, you know, you need to call the police and tell them you're going home to a domestic violence situation. She was so smart.
Right.
And I did. And when I walked in, he's high as a kite, you know, acting like nothing's wrong. And he said to me, I chartered a private plane. I'm taking our daughter to Florida. I'm like, no, you're not. I mean, don't even screw with me with my kids. He grabbed my daughter and tried to take her. And that's when he got violent, like they show in the movie, when he kicked me down the stairs. But I was 31 at the time and in great shape, and I chased him. And then you see that scene in the movie at the end where he drives her away. I don't know if you remember, like into the wall almost.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so I stopped that from happening, saved her. And then the police came because I had called them because I didn't even have time to really dial them, but I dialed 911 and hung up. And they came and took him away. And then he went to rehab.
Okay.
Because the only way he could see us and come back to us is if he was sober.
The FBI can lie.
No.
And we can't, but at 28, I didn't know that. So I figure like we had a lot of involvement in that Varsity Blues case where all those parents went to prison. And the reason they got people to entrap themselves is by saying, Rick Singer would say, my nonprofit is under IRS audit. I need to talk to you about the way you got money to my nonprofit. It wasn't under audit. That was the ruse the FBI created to get these parents to get themselves into trouble. So they can lie. So when the meeting opened, they actually told my lawyer that I was just a witness. I'm like, well, that sounds better than a target. That I knew. So about 7 minutes into the meeting, Paul Bertrand looks directly at me and says, Justin, do you ever remember reading a press release that said your client, Keith, averaged 27% a year in his hedge fund? And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't remember that. So he said, let me ask you again. My lawyer's starting to get nervous, right? He said, so let me ask you again. Do you recall a press release stating that your client's hedge fund averaged 27% a year? And I'm thinking to myself, this is the best the FBI has to offer. How many times do I have to tell this